For 30 years, Johnny Carson dominated late-night TV with The Tonight Show. Night after night, millions tuned in to see the quick wit, the KFAS, and a legendary guest sitting on his iconic couch. Everyone knew that getting invited on a Carson's show was a make-or-break proposition for an act's career. But what the viewers didn't know was which of those guests Johnny loved most in his heart. For years, his personal favorites remained a mystery tucked away behind that sly smile of his. Among the guests he treasured most, one particular choice left everyone stunned. And no, it's not who you'd expect. Early life and career. Johnny Carson, destined to be late-night television's king, was born on October 23, 1925 in Corning, Iowa. His mother, Ruth Elizabeth, and his father, Homer Lloyd Kit Carson, a power company manager, were his parents. Johnny had an older sister and a younger brother, Richard, who would later follow him into television. In his childhood, the family moved all around Iowa and later to Norfolk, Nebraska, when Johnny was 8 years old. That is where his love for entertaining first began to grow. At age 12, while visiting at a friend's house, he discovered a book about magic and later ordered a magician's kit. With that set, he incessantly practiced card magic day and night, often driving his family nuts as he commanded them, pick a card, any card. His mother even made him a cape, and in no time, he was doing magic tricks in front of an audience. He started performing when he was 14. The great Carson performed at local clubs for $3 a show. After high school, Carson hitchhiked his way to Hollywood in the pursuit of his dreams. He is said to have once been fined $50 for impersonating a midshipman. Although this anecdote has often been disputed, at the onset of World War II, Carson joined the United States Navy in 1943. He studied under the V-12 Navy College program at Columbia University and Millsaps College before becoming an ensign. He served aboard the USS Pennsylvania as a communications officer, where he decrypted top-secret messages. Carson was also a master amateur boxer, sporting a 15:01 record with most of the fights being held on the ship. Later in his life, he would say his most proud Navy moment was when he did a magic trick for James Forstall, the Secretary of the Navy. That trick gave him confidence that he could entertain anyone no matter how tough the audience. Following the war, Carson utilized the GI Bill and attended the University of Nebraska. He initially majored in journalism, but later switched to speech and drama because he wanted to get into radio. He even wrote his college thesis on comedy, studying radio skits, and how to make humor. He graduated in 1949 with a degree in radio and speech. He began his career at a local television and radio station in Omaha in 1950, whereby he immediately showed flair for quick-witted improvisation. He transferred to Los Angeles, where comedian Red Skelton realized his potential and gave him a job as a writer. Carson substituted for Skelton one night during a live show, which provided an added boost to his name. Soon enough, Jack Benny asked him to be a guest on his show, foretelling a rosy career for the young comedian. Carson anchored several shows in the 1950s, among them The Johnny Carson Show and the game show Who Do You Trust?, where he first got to know his future sidekick Ed McMahon. By 1962, NBC finally succeeded in persuading Carson to host The Tonight Show, although he had shown some hesitation. This move rewrote television history forever. Carson's feud with Wayne Newton. Back in 1980, Johnny Carson was making headlines, not for a humorous monologue, but for a falling out with Wayne Newton. Here's how it went down. Carson was set to purchase the Aladdin Hotel and Casino in Las Vegas, but at the 11th hour, he backed out of the deal. A consortium led by Wayne Newton stepped in and bought the property instead. The press, naturally, told the story as Carson losing the deal, and that didn't amuse him. According to lawyer Henry Bushkin, Carson grew irked by all the rumors and started making jokes about Newton on The Tonight Show. Those jokes began a feud between the two performers. Newton didn't let it slide. Years later on Larry King Live, he went off script. Johnny Carson is a mean-spirited human being, and there are people that he has hurt that people will never know about. And for some, reason at some point he decided to turn that kind of negative attention toward me. and I refuse to have it. Newton's rage wasn't just hot air. He later said that he went to Carson's office at NBC and threatened to pummel him unless Carson ceased mocking him in public. Pretty vivid image. Newton confronting Carson, insisting that the jokes cease. What is surprising is how out of character it was for Carson to find himself in such an overt public battle with someone he had teased. Most of the time, his barbs remained safely within the domain of satire and comedy. But not this time. Newton's confrontation reveals how finely calibrated the scale was between humor and offense, particularly when large sums of money, pride, and ego are at stake. This feud also reveals something more profound about Carson, his hypersensitivity to image, particularly when he believed he had been cornered by the media. When they implied that he lost the Aladdin business, he took it personally. Rather than let it drop, he used his bully pulpit on television to strike back. And Newton struck back. This is more than good dirt, informs us as to what Carson valued: reputation, respect, and how he was perceived by others. When someone crosses a line, real or imaginary, he would strike back in ways that involve more than a quick joke. Now, let's reveal those 10 guests who were loved the most by Johnny Carson. 1. Steve Martin. Steve Martin was not merely another comedian who came by Carson's couch. He became a favorite of Carson's. Throughout the years, Martin regularly appeared on The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson. So much so that his name is included among the regulars whom the network still features in its featured guest series. What made Martin such a great fit was his style. Slightly wild, slightly crazy, always unexpected. He combined stand-up, banjo playing, offbeat jokes, and even balloon animals in some routines. Carson enjoyed guests who added their own zing, and Martin certainly did. The Johnny Carson official website itself states that Steve Martin was more than just a wild and crazy guy. He was also a favorite guest of Johnny Carson. Since he appeared so regularly, Martin became one of those visitors the viewers anticipated and waited to see. When Steve Martin appeared, they knew they were in for a good time and a surprise. Through the years, Martin's visits became part of the Tonight Show identity. He was not a guest, but a regular treat. And it's telling, too, that in the featured guests DVD set, which collects the most memorable Tonight Show episodes, Martin is one of the names selected for special treatment. Selection of that type doesn't come from popularity. It comes from respect and love for what he contributed to the show. Another hint, viewership was often increased by Martin's appearance. His guest spots and interviews lingered in the minds of fans, posted on highlight reels, and referenced in anniversary sets of Carson's finest work. You can find most of Martin's Tonight Show segments brought together in a YouTube playlist devoted to Steve Martin on Johnny Carson. Steve Martin received so many invitations because he wasn't only funny. He was unpredictable, innovative, and someone Carson really enjoyed watching and talking to. For decades, Martin made The Tonight Show more than a talk show. He made an experience. And that's one of the most obvious indicators that Carson included him among his favorites. 2. David Briner. David Briner was one of the names you'd always expect to pop up when Johnny Carson turned on The Tonight Show. He wasn't just a guest once in a while. He showed up more than 150 times during the 1970s and 80s, making him the most frequent guest during Carson's reign. It was his comedic approach that made Briner unique. He wasn't about outrageous stunts or boisterous jokes. He was all about observational humor, laughing at the kind of things people experience daily but do not often discuss.